Welcome, everyone, and those joining us on Zoom to Summit Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Our centering thought today is, the best spiritual instruction is to wake up in the morning and say, I wonder what's going to happen today, by Pema Chodron. As we enjoy our prelude, let's silence our cell phones, quiet our minds, and open our hearts.
Good morning. I'm going to play a prelude that's also one of our hymns, but in this case it's called Be Thou My Vision, and I think we're singing it later as Wake Now My Senses, arranged by Mark Hayes.
Thank you, Karen. You already made something beautiful happen today. I'm Sherry Ryan. I'm the service associate today. I have medium-length brown hair. I'm wearing glasses, black pants, and a white button-down shirt, which looks very much like I'm ushering, which I will be today after service. So I added a scarf to make it more interesting. Here at Summit, we ask you to imagine a different kind of religious community. We don't all believe the same things, but we come together uniting around a commitment to love, to justice, and to care for one another and the world we inhabit. We look for wisdom wherever we can find it, wherever it can be found, in world's religions, modern science, nature, philosophy, and the quiet insights of personal experience. Together, we are on a lifelong spiritual adventure. If you are new and would like to know more, we invite you to go to our website, summituuf.org, and click on the Visitors button. That's summituuf.org. If you are here in person, you can also visit the welcome table, which is right outside the front door. Better still, everyone is very friendly, so stick around and chat with someone after the service. We now have 2 announcements, Al and Aline. Is there anyone else that has an announcement? Okay, Margot. Okay, so 3 announcements. Al?
Good morning. Yeah, I'm Al Mork, Chair of the Social Justice and Action Committee. And this year, next February and March, the Social Justice and Action Committee is thinking about putting on an interfaith shelter as we have for a dozen years. We work through the interfaith shelter. With the homeless shelter, we have the people here for 14 days. And my co-chair this year, our co-coordinator will be Eileen King, who has done it as a co-coordinator for many years at the Unity Church that she used to attend. So what it involves is we have people so the guests that are coming in, the homeless guests, are clean and sober, looking for work, or training for a job, or working a low-paying job. And so what we do specifically is we put them up for the night. We treat them an evening meal and also breakfast, which they make their own breakfast and lunch. And so we will be working through, like I say, February and March next year. And what we're sending out to you, we also have 3 other churches in East County that assist us with either bringing a meal or doing an overnight. And so what you'll be sending out this week, receiving an email that asks with 2 questions, basically. One that asks, should Summit put on an interfaith shelter next winter? The second thing is, if so, would you be willing to participate? And you don't have to say how you participate. We could address that later on, but that would be so. Okay, thank you for your time. So.
Good morning. I'm Aline King, also representing social justice this morning. And Western Service Workers has asked for our help next Saturday, which is Stamp Out Hunger Day. The El Cajon Post Office, the 92020, has dedicated all their food collected by the postal workers to Western Service Workers. So what we need is someone with a van or a truck to go to the post office and pick up food at 4 o'clock in the afternoon and go to Western Service Workers. If you're interested, please see me after service. I have a handout on all the particulars, but it's a good way to help, and we get tons of food, which is amazing if the postal carriers pick it up and bring it to the post office for us to then deliver. March. What month it is? May 9th, Saturday, this coming Saturday, 4 o'clock.
Good morning. I'm Margaret Mariano, and just here to remind you that tomorrow, the first Monday of the month, is our poetry workshop day from 10 to noon in the library. Come discover the poet within. You all are poets, you just don't know it. So come discover it within. We use it as a time to work with exercises that stimulate our creativity, to listen to work that's being worked on, get feedback. And what's also wonderful is many people who come and who are not want to be poets, but they use poetry as a way to find more bounty in what they say with fewer words. So once again, I reinforce you're all poets, and any questions you can speak to me afterwards, but 10 to noon in the Summit Library tomorrow, at first Monday of every month. Thank you.
Hi there, everyone. My name is Anya Vale Martinez, and as a participant in the Summit Choir, I'd like to welcome you all to join us for our concert this June 5th. That's Friday, June 5th. Yeah, we'll be singing songs and talking about the process we took to pick the song, learn it, the struggles and the strengths we did with each song. And there'll be a few soloists as well. So it'll be a great event for us all to participate together with. Thank you.
Our commitment to justice compels us each Sunday to pause and acknowledge that we gather on the ancestral lands of the Kumeyaay people. This land was not freely given, and the history of its taking is part of the story we inherit. We honor the resilience, sovereignty, and ongoing presence of the Kumeyaay Nation. Next, we will light the chalice. The flaming chalice was used initially as a coded symbol for the Unitarians during World War II. It secretly indicated a safe place for Jews and other persecuted groups to get help. It remains the UU symbol today. Kathy will now light the chalice while I read Welcome to This Community of Seekers by Alexis Engelbrett. Welcome to this community of seekers, of questioners, of those open to the revelation that comes from experiences with one another and the spirit of life. May we remember that while we have some answers, we don't have all the answers. While we know some things, we don't know everything. While we have lived, others have experiences very different from our own. Welcome to this community of questions and possibilities. Please stand as you are able for the UU hymn and aspiration. Please be seated and welcome Reverend Casey for our reading.
Good morning, everyone. That was enthusiastic. I liked it. I am the Reverend Casey Marie Pandell. It is my joy and my honor to be the minister here at Summit Unitarian Universalist Fellowship. Whether it is your first visit today or your 5,000th visit, you are whole, you are holy, you are loved, and you are so welcome here. I am a 5'4", 36-year-old woman with shoulder-length blue hair, and if you see blue somewhere other than my hair, no, you didn't. Wearing a black dress and a black stole with silver phases of the moon on it. Our reading today comes from Teresa Honey Youngblood, entitled A Faith of Holy Cartographers. In order to travel the great way together, we have to cultivate a sense of belonging that is not conditional upon conformity. I don't want a smoothed out, disproportionately aggrandized faith that attempts to draw all comers to its one self-righteous place at the top of the map of humanity. leaving all the messiness of their upbringings and lived realities behind them. Instead, I want an imaginative and wandering faith of holy cartographers, eager encounterers who pay exquisite attention to the terrain and the systemic forces that shape it. Leaders who meet people where they are, approach them with curiosity, hold lightly their own individual stories, and are willing to be surprised and delighted and moved by what they discover in the treasure trove of another. This cannot happen with assimilation. It has to be transformation. We all have to be aiming for transformation and to be willing to be guided not by positions and placeholders, but by principles held in covenant and to which anyone of loving intention can guide us back. The old top-heavy map simply cannot get us there. Could we teach one another how to do this? Could we make the foundation of our faith development learning how to inhabit an open and curious presence by rooting firmly in our own mutual belovedness, as it is so beautifully articulated in the Universalist half of our heritage? I want us to heal one another through the fiercely compassionate presence so that we can chart a different path as a matter of lived theology. So that we can caringly release the old one-directional paths that aren't broad enough for all of us to accompany one another. I think this degree of spiritual security and resiliency could be what gets us there, what frees our souls to encounter the sacred terrain of one another's experiences. What we discover and share could be our new map, more complete and truer than the one we were handed and that we didn't know that we could leave behind. This is how we could grow our new way together. Please rise in mind, body, or spirit to join us in singing hymn 361 in our gray hardback hymnals, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In. Don't ask me to be a cantor.
Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your ears to the song. Open your hearts, everyone. Don't be afraid of sorrow or change. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
For those of you laughing, that was a little different than we've done it before, which is my favorite part of being in a congregation like this, because sometimes things change on a dime. Our joys and concerns portion of our service give us the opportunity to hold the things in our lives that are too big to hold alone. Our joys and concerns can be sent either to myself or Stacy Sasaki via text or email throughout the week. And if not done prior to service, you can all come up to the chancel at the beginning of before the beginning of service on a Sunday. And whether spoken aloud, all are welcome to light a candle as so moved. Love, that which connects us from soul to soul. We know that there are things in this world that are too tender to share, or even too great to share. We know that those things are welcome in this space, no matter what they are, whether spoken aloud or shared close to our hearts. When we come into this space together, we know we are buoyed by our love for one another, our care for each other, and our care for the world. When we come into this room on a Sunday, we know we are doing so as a way of helping to build the next great thing that we know this world is capable of. When you are here and allowed to be fully yourself, fully loved in this space. We hold all of the concerns that help make up the worlds that we live in, and we hold joyously the joys that help bring us into this community together. So may it be, and amen. And I would like to invite Mary Carter Vale, our Director of Religious Exploration.
Good morning. Good morning. My name is Mary, and today I am wearing a bright green dress with flowers on it that kind of look like fried eggs. So imagine fried egg, white with a yellow center. And I'm 5'7", I have to make sure I get that right, and currently have graying red hair. So I'm here to share a story with you for today. If anybody would like to come up to be closer to the story, you can. I do have a prop. The little dog. And I might need some help. This might get a little chaotic. I might need some help with barking. The story has some barking. Can we practice barking? Ruff, 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 ruff. Ruff, 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 ruff. Ruff, ruff. Okay, good. We have lots of good barkers. So, all right. So this story comes from somebody who's really important in Unitarian Universalist spaces. Sophia Lyon-Fawes did a collection of stories. This book was published in 1948. And she was what we consider one of the mothers of Unitarian Universalist religious education. She collected stories from around the world, and this one comes from India, and used them as for teaching our values and how we care about each other in the world. And it was revolutionary at the time because biblical stories were the only ones that were really used. So this is one of her stories. It's called The Dog and the Heartless King. Get to my printout that I have here. Okay. Once upon a time, there lived a king who cared about nobody but himself. He had grown rich from the high taxes he had forced his people to pay, while they became poorer and poorer. He lived in a gorgeous palace, while the poor people who built it for him still lived in thatched huts and tumble-down hovels. The king's table was always heaped with delicious foods, and, well, most of the people had only one plain meal a day, sometimes not even that. But the heartless king did not care. If he had what he wanted, that was enough for him. So one day, a hunter came to the palace gates, intending to teach the heartless king a lesson. The hunter brought with him an enormous dog. Imagine big dog. An enormous dog. The king was fond of hunting, and the enormous dog fascinated him. So the hunter and the dog were both welcome to the palace ground. But the enormous dog was no ordinary dog, and her bark was like the roar of thunder. Can we bark? Ruff, 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 ruff. Big dog bark. And the first time she opened her mouth and barked, the awful noise shook the walls of the palace and frightened the king and all of his courtiers. The dog had stopped. If the dog had stopped with one or two barks, the matter might have been forgotten. But he barked a lot. She barked a lot. But again and again, her fierce roaring shook the palace and the earth itself. Before long, there was no resting between barks. Nobody in the palace could hear themselves talk. And the king was desperate, so he sent for the hunter. He asked the hunter, "Why does your dog make such deafening noises?" "The dog is hungry," said the hunter. Immediately, the king ordered a big plate full of meat be brought, and in almost no time, the enormous dog had licked the plate clean. Then once again, she began to bark. Bark. The second plate of meat was then brought. And the dog disposed of it just as quickly as the first, and again, the dog began to bark. Over and over again, the plate was filled, and over again, the enormous dog quickly ate the whole plateful and began to bark as loudly as ever. The king was angry. He called the hunter and said, "You and your dog must leave the palace at once. We cannot endure this deafening noise any longer." But the hunter was firm. "Your Majesty, we have been sent to you by one greater than you are. We are here to stay." The king was frightened. He even grasped the arms of his chair and stared at the hunter. The king was not accustomed to having anyone speak to him this way. "Will nothing satisfy the hunger of your enormous dog?" the king asked him. "Nothing that is easy for you to give," said the hunter. "Your Majesty, there are people in this kingdom who are eating all of the food and who are not sharing it with those who do the work in the field to make the food grow. As a result, there are people who are always hungry. This dog feels the hunger of every person in the kingdom who does not have enough food to eat. And as long as even one person is hungry, this dog will be hungry, and he will keep barking." On hearing this, and hearing the hunter say this, the king was even more frightened than ever. If it had never entered his thoughts that he'd been doing anything wrong, he thought he was always doing everything right. He had thought the people of his kingdom were simply supposed to always do exactly what he wanted. It never occurred to him that a king should think of the happiness of anyone except himself. He was now angry from his head to his feet, inside and out. Either he would go mad hearing the continuous barking of the enormous dog, or something would have to be done, and very quickly. He called his wise advisors together and said, "What shall we do?" What do you guys think we should do? What do you think we should do? Feed them? Feed the people? Let's see what the wise people said. The wise ones bowed their heads and walked off to think over the question together. But try as hard as they could, the advisors could only see two possible solutions. Either the enormous dog must be killed, or else every hungry person in the kingdom must be fed. No one was willing to kill the dog. We like the dog. So that meant that there was only one thing left to do. Everybody in the kingdom must somehow be fed. The wise advisor were very clear in their minds about it, and they returned to the king and told him plainly what had to be done. Then they had to shout, of course, because the enormous dog was still barking. The king hesitated no longer. "Pull all the servants on the palace ground to work at once," he commanded. "Go to the storerooms and get all the bags of rice you can find. Plus, pile them high in the carts, and also take meat from the cupboards and gather all the vegetables and fruits from my gardens. Send the servants out with these loaded carts to all the towns and villages in my kingdom. Command the servants to find the people who are hungry, give them generously of these foods, and keep on giving food until not a single person in this land is hungry." The advisors hurried away to do exactly what the king had commanded. Soon there was shouting and laughing and hustling and bustling all over the palace. In fact, the royal servants made so much noise that they could hardly hear the barking of the enormous dog. Presently, a long line of carts piled high with bags and baskets of food rolled out through the palace gates. All day long, day after day, the carts kept going until every village in the land, until the food was taken to every village, every house, and every person was no longer hungry. At last, the day came when the enormous dog stopped barking. And he lay down quietly beside the king's chair, and the dog was satisfied. So he took a nice nap, as dogs do. All the people inside the palace grounds were very happy at the peace in their minds because they knew that there were no hungry neighbors. And everywhere in the land, the people were contented. For the next few weeks, the enormous dog stayed by the king's side, just to be sure the king never returned to his old ways. And a few times the dog barked to remind the king about justice. And each time the king remembered the important lesson he had learned. Finally, the dog was convinced that the king truly understood the meaning of justice. And one morning, she simply got up and walked out of the palace and went to bark for justice in a new land. Thank you. So this is an old story, still relevant. Still relevant. And we're going to talk about the light of justice in our classes as we go talk about, we're going to make lightsabers for Star Wars Day, which is tomorrow. May the 4th be with you. And in interest of that, we're going to sing this little light of mine, one verse, as we head off to our classrooms. I know it says a different song, but Karen's going to do this little light of mine.
Please join us for a time of silent prayer, meditation, or reflection. It is a hymn. I skipped it. My bad. Thanks, Eleanor. Good looking out. Please rise in mind, body, or spirit to sing 298 in our great hymnals. Wake now my senses. Prayer, meditation, or reflection as I read words from the Reverend Michelle Collins entitled The Inner Tilt of the Head. Source of love and deep questioning, you move in the restless parts of us that ask, what else is true? Thank you for the spark that keeps us from going numb, for the inner tilt of the head and the heart that reminds us to look again. Awaken in us a curiosity that is kind, not cruel, that seeks understanding rather than judgment, that can say, I don't know, without shame. When habit narrows our vision, widen it. When cynicism hardens our hearts, open them with wonder. Let our days be filled with small discoveries, and our lives be shaped by learning that never ends. Blessed be and amen. I think it won't come as too much of a surprise to folks who've been here for a while that I was the kid that was the question asker. But why? I was the but why kid, my poor parents. Why is the sky blue? Explanation. But why? Well, because that's the way it is. But why? Well, that's because that's what scientists tell us. But why? My mom used to tell me that if I ever got kidnapped, that they would pay my parents to bring me back. So I don't think it's necessarily a coincidence. I always say I'm sort of Catholic adjacent. My dad's family is Methodist. My father has not been inside of a church except for my ordination a year and a half ago in probably like 40 years. And my mom will tell you she's Catholic, did catechism and First Holy Communion and all that, but isn't practicing. It was really important to my mom when I was a kid that I at least did some of the classes. You might have noticed I just said some. I don't think it was that important at the end of the day. So I've never done any of the First Holy Communion or the confirmation or any of that, and it's probably a good thing, because anybody who grew up in a faith where you're not allowed to ask questions probably got kicked out of Sunday school a lot. Did any of you ever get kicked out of Sunday school for asking too many questions? Yeah, I thought you might, Roland. So, not to say that that's not a judgment call on Catholicism either. That's just saying that everybody I know that ever went to Catholic school is decidedly not Catholic now. And most of them have told me, I asked too many questions and I got in trouble a lot. And I didn't like that. And that's one of the things about Unitarian Universalism that I love. Who remembers our 7 principles? Raise your hand. Oh, that's actually really important for the rest of this sermon. A few years ago, we went through a process with our bylaws where we were in big conversations for literally years. I think it's like a 2.5-year process to decide whether or not we're going to change our Unitarian Universalist bylaws. And it was painful. Not because it took forever, that's exceptionally Unitarian of us. We do love a good conversation. Just come back for our annual meeting on the 7th and you'll see. But there was a lot of conversation about what makes us Unitarian Universalists. Unitarian Universalists came together as the Unitarians and the Universalists in 1961. And I would like to share with you the principles and purposes from 1961. Any of you who've been around for a long time are laughing. In accordance with these corporate purposes, the members of the Unitarian Universalist Association, dedicated to the principles of a free faith, unite in seeking to strengthen one another in a free and disciplined search for truth as the foundation of our religious fellowship. To cherish the spread of the universal truths taught by the great prophets and teachers of humanity in every age and tradition, immemorially summarized in the Judeo-Christian heritage as love to God and love to man. To affirm, defend, and promote the supreme worth of every human personality, the dignity of man, and the use of the democratic method in human relationships. To implement our vision of one world by striving for a world community founded on ideals of brotherhood, justice, and peace. To serve the needs of member churches and fellowships, to organize new churches and fellowships, and to extend and strengthen liberal religion, and finally, to encourage cooperation with men of goodwill in every land. Does that sound like the Unitarian Universalism most of you know? No. I think there are a couple of people who might have gotten a little itchy at the Judeo-Christian part of that. There is a reason that Unitarian Universalists use the search for truth and meaning as part of our faith. Some of you have heard me preach before about sacred curiosity. That's not just me riffing on something that like my wooey self wants to bring you. That's baked into our faith. In 2006, when there was a celebration in the UU World magazine about the fact that our new principles and purposes had reached their 15th birthday. Our new principles and purposes, I can't say are much easier to understand than that one, but I'll do my best. We, the member congregations of the Unitarian Universalist Association, covenant to affirm and promote the inherent worth and dignity of every person, justice, equity, and compassion in human relationships, acceptance of one another and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations, a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, the right of conscience and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and in society at large, the goal of world community with peace, liberty, and justice for all, and respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are part. That's just our principles. That doesn't include our purposes. Again, Unitarians are really wordy. You'll see how different those two were, right? 1961 and 1985. What happened between 1961 and 1985 is the women got real tired of the brotherhood talk and the human and the mankind talk. The idea of patriarchy and gendered language was incredibly painful for the women of the Unitarian Universalist movement at the time. There were arguments about whether or not the term fellowship was inclusive or not. You're laughing, but think about that. What's a fellow? Melody, are you a fellow? But Dan sure is. Right. So you can see the use of reason. Sorry, you guys are right in my line of vision. It worked really well. You can see the use of reason and questioning in our faith, because the women sat there for 15 years and went, hold on a second. Are you sure that's really inclusive? And people went, yeah, of course it is. And they went, mankind, humankind. Is it though? And that's how the push towards the new bylaws at the time happened. Now, in 1961, it was two faiths coming together, and boy, was it contentious. There was one young person who said that they would stay up until 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning just listening to the arguments that the Unitarians and the Universalists were having to come together and make these bylaws. By 1985, it was totally unanimous. The women started the movement from questions, and it went about with more questions and no answers, but lots of questions. Because we were allowed to ask those questions. We were encouraged to ask those questions about who is in and who is out. So by 1985, when they finally got around to the vote, because it took a couple of years to get there and a lot of different committee meetings, it was a totally unanimous vote at General Assembly. Unitarian Universalists every 15 years look at their bylaws again. Who has been a Unitarian Universalist long enough to remember from 1985 to like 3 years ago? One of you, two of you, three. Okay, great. Did we have a bylaws change 15 years ago? No. That's because it didn't pass. Because as Unitarian Universalists like to do, we had a lot of conversation and we could not come to an agreement on the words. I couldn't even tell you what those were because they've disappeared into history. But 15 years later, we went through another bylaws revision. For some of you, that might feel like, what do you mean we went through a bylaws revision? Nobody asked me. It's because unfortunately it happened during COVID, which made it exceptionally difficult for people who were still in a lot of ways not used to using technology the way that we do, weren't as engaged with the process. I remember when I was in my internship speaking with one of our congregants, and he was really distraught over the possibility of changing our principles and purposes. Now I'm going to back up a little bit. For those of you that might not be familiar, Unitarian Universalists are called a non-creedal denomination. What that means is that we do not have one document, one book, one paper that says, this is who we are, this is what we believe. We all have the right to find truth and meaning through our own experience. So we don't have one book that we look at for all the answers. But The principles and purposes from 1985 became so deeply ingrained in who we were, it was really painful for people to go through the process of asking, who are we now? Who do we want to be in the future? So this particular congregant at my internship site sighed heavily and goes, who are we if we are not our 7 principles? That sounds pretty creedal to me, doesn't it? And I remember telling him, listen, man, no one's telling you you can't use the 7 principles to define how you see our faith, for starters. Our principles are a wonderful guiding light. And also, it's just the bylaws. I promise, changing our bylaws does not change our faith. What it does is it changes how we show up in the world. So now, they've gotten a little shorter, kind of. I always look over at this wonderful piece of art because it reminds me of the values flower so much. Justice, equity, transformation, pluralism, what's the I for? Interdependence, there we go. See, this is part of the process, right? Interdependence and pluralism. When the G is generosity, yes. And you'll hear me say jet pig, because I actually watch the letters jet pig go across my brain when I tell this. I remember asking people the question, do you know what our 4th principle is? Eleanor, what was the 4th principle?
Free and responsible search for truth.
Did you have to look at the back of the... Thank you for letting me pick on you. Sometimes we get so stuck in the actual things that we do that we forget how important the process of asking questions is. When we started that bylaws revision a few years ago, we kept asking, who are we? Who do we want to be? How do we want to show up in the world? And for us to have changed our bylaws from the ones that I read, the slightly shorter ones, to the even shorter ones that are all centered in love now, meant that we were trying to make a statement about showing up for justice, showing up for equity, being transformative, using generosity and pluralism and interdependence in not just how we function as congregations, but how we show up as Unitarian Universalists in the world. Now, I tell people all the time when they sign our membership book, they're not signing their lives away to Unitarian Universalism. I'm not baptizing you up here, I promise. No head dunking, I swear. But it does guide how we interact here. And I always want to make sure that when I talk to you folks about sacred curiosity, I'm not doing it just to make you feel uncomfortable. At one point in my life, I was wildly, vociferously, and obnoxiously atheist. Not saying that's a problem with atheism. That was a me problem. That was a skill issue. I was so uncomfortable with what it meant to say I had a faith because I had spent so long railing against it because none of it was for me. I have church people? Ew. No, I don't. At least I would have said that 10 years ago. But asking questions helped me find my way into being a Unitarian Universalist. Luckily, being the but why kid was really comfortable for me, even if the questions were not. And I was lucky that I was in a Unitarian Universalist community that said, come on, let's do this together. If I had not been allowed to ask those questions, I would not be standing in front of you today. I can guarantee you, I probably would have slept in until about 10 o'clock and had a cup of coffee and taken my dogs for a walk and been reading a book right now instead. But because I let questions be a part of my spiritual exploration, not just how I gather information about the world, but really about how I sit with myself and my own wonderings, it helped me open up to a place where I could be in a space like this and walk with all of you when you go on those journeys too. So I know when we say certain things that are hard for some people, and when I say me, I mean me and Mary, because we're the ones that do most of that educational piece here, we're not doing it just to make you uncomfortable, I promise. We're doing it because those questions matter. So I've said before, when you feel those bristlings of discomfort, or you feel those bristlings of being a little irritated with me because you don't like what I'm saying, good. That's what I want. That's what I want you to lean into. Those are the things that really show us where we are, where we want to go. If you just wake up every morning and, oh, it's fine, that's great. But there's always more to learn and always more to explore. So when I talk about sacred curiosity, that's probably one of the only spiritual practices I can say that I engage with regularly, because boy, does sitting down to pray every day sound really exhausting. When you can look at the world through the lens of sacredness, and what I mean by sacredness isn't necessarily Jesus, God, whoever, but that divine that's in all of us because we get to be here, it opens up your questions for a lot more than just yes or no. And sometimes it makes you a lot more comfortable when there are no answers. We'll talk about that a little bit more next week. But sacred curiosity isn't meant to be some wooey way to connect with people. It is really genuinely being able to sit in this space alone and together and say, what if? What next? How exciting that we get to do that. Because I can think of a lot of people who don't get to do that in their churches, in their fellowships. And how wonderful that we get to do it and know that we are not expected to agree with each other along the way. I think that's one of the things, bless you, not necessarily that makes us revolutionary as Unitarian Universalists, but I think is one of the things that makes us pretty darn close to it. So may it be, and amen. And now I think we have our offertory.
We will now receive the offering. Your gifts help us work together for a better world. And they also keep the lights on and our incredible staff paid. The smallest gift is welcome. If you prefer, there is a QR code in the order of service. If you open it up on the top right-hand corner is the QR code that you can use. If you are on Zoom, please use the Sunday plate option in the chat.
I'm going to play a piece that is based on the Southern Harmony, which is a collection of tunes. The tune is used across many faith traditions. In ours, it's number 315 in your hymnal, if you want to look at the words. It's called This Old World.
Please stand as you are able for hymn number 414 as we leave this friendly place.
When I think about questions, I think about that story where a person is making Thanksgiving dinner and they cut parts of the turkey off. And someone sees them do this kind of odd thing and goes, "Why do you do that?" And they go, "I don't know, my mom did it." So they go and ask mom, and go, "I don't know, my mom did it." And they go back like 3 generations and they find out that the only reason it gets done is because it didn't fit in the oven originally, so they had to cut it down. Sometimes we just get into these habits of just doing things because that's the way we've always done it. But if we didn't ask questions, if we always just did it the way it was always done, I think we pretty much would still think that the sun rises and falls every day because a dude in a chariot does it. And that our spring comes because Demeter's daughter is home from the underworld. If that's the way that we always did it, Jim Crow would still be a lot worse than it is right now. If we did things because that's the way that we always done it, there would be more segregation in our world. There would be more hatred, more violence. When we're willing to ask those uncomfortable questions, but why, we can change the world. Amen, shalom, salam, ashe, namaste, and blessed be. Go now in peace. May the light within you be a blessing to the world.
Close our service by extinguishing the chalice. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. If you are new, we invite you to stay afterwards and join us here in the sanctuary at about 11:15 to discuss the sermon topic. We call it our community gathering. Or you can head right over to the salon for food and fellowship. The salon is a separate building on the other side of the parking lot in that direction. Folks on Zoom, you are welcome to participate in the community gathering. Now we will sing our closing song, standing, forming a circle, holding hands if you choose to. The words will be on the screens.